So, Lydia, welcome to the Scenic Route podcast. It's so lovely to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay, I'm so excited. Like, you should have heard us before I hit record. We were already talking illegal substances and all
Doesn't
the
sound
good
as
things.
bad. Doesn't sound as bad as it sounds.
I know, all the good things early in the morning. Or it's not early in the morning for you because you're based in Bali, right?
That's right. It's afternoon. And
Lovely.
I told you before when we first had our intro call, I usually don't work at all after 12 o'clock. So I'm leaving a space open for you because I enjoy our conversation so much.
Thank you. I feel truly honored. Like, this is so amazing. The support that's pouring in from people who are able to welcome here. It's amazing. So, hey, can you briefly walk us through your story, the stories that made you, how you started out, what were the pivotal points, and how you got where you're today?
Yeah. So, Screw the Cubicle was actually never meant to be a business idea. It was sort of a blog documenting my identity crisis, leaving corporate to being an entrepreneur and not having an entrepreneur example, for example, in my family. For like the last 50 years, I think my great grandfather, I think, was an entrepreneur, something like that, but not anyone that I know of, And so, my story really started as a bit of I didn't also intend to leave corporate. So it wasn't like I had this moment I woke up and was like, you know what, I'm going to
save up and I'm gonna ditch corporate.
No. I was a worker bee. I was a type A perfectionist, high achieving person. My family's originally from Malaysia. I'm born in a little island called Penang. So we immigrated when I was quite young, around 10 years old, to Canada. And it's really instilled upon the way that I was brought up that if you're going to make it in Canada, and we didn't come from a very wealthy family, we were actually quite poor coming into Canada as well, that, you have to work twice as hard as regular people.
Yeah, so you have two job options, lawyer or doctor, I suppose.
Yeah, a lot of times they want you to be a doctor, an accountant, fight in finance. They love finance. Asian parents love finance.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I get that. Okay, yeah, finance is solid.
Absolutely, it is solid. You should always learn about money. But, they were, I think the way that my parents have always subconsciously planted the seed in my head is like, we gave up a lot to get you here. So you better make do and, of the opportunities that you get from here. Right. So I have had that, and I don't, I think a lot of there's some positives that have come out from that experience as well. I learned the power of work ethic. I do learn about sort of like being high quality in my work and really saying what I mean and doing what I say. Right. And so those things I still really much honor and want to take with me in my life.
Yes.
But the con of that, right, is also that I never knew how to stop working, so my
paired with your overachieving self, I imagine there were some pretty toxic moments. Like, it could mess with your head, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I think, knowing what they know today is like, that's all they knew as well, right? Like
we're not blaming your parents. Like, I mean, they have their own stories and upbringings and generational stories that are woven through your family. So absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when I was about 27 years old, I was working for an international education company in Canada, where my job responsibility as a business development director was bringing more business. And so I was working a lot with the Embassy of Canada, doing trade missions in Europe. And, at the time, when I had sort of my corporate burnout moment, which was a very scary time for me, I was on a business trip for probably I think like the 30th day of my trip, something like that, about a month I've been on the road. I'm usually on the road about 6 months out of the year as well. So it sounded like a really sexy job when I got it, because I'm like, oh, jet setting,
it sounds very glamorous. Like I know I was very tempted when I read my last corporate job role. I was like, ooh, like trade shows in Japan and Asia and India and China, like sign me up. And then after doing that for 2 years, I'm like, oh God, I need a break.
Yeah, it's a pretty high, like a big hustle sort of industry, and you attend all the conferences, and you're out there in different time zones, and your body needs to be awake.
It messes with you.
I usually have to go into a meeting right after I get off the plane, you know, so that is a very, very stressful job. And I think in a lot of ways, the sort of role I had, which had a lot of responsibility and accolades and, you know, a great salary attached to it, came with that
Your
responsibility.
Asian parents were so proud.
Oh yeah, they were like, this is the most money anyone's ever made in our family, right? And I was only 27 at the time, right? And so this is a big, big, big achievement, especially because I didn't go to a top university. You know, they didn't have money to bring me anything. I was in lots of debt trying to pay for my own education. This is a big achievement in a way, right? Like for our family. And I was probably working at that point an average of about 60 to 70 hours a week, right? Goodness. And so and at that time, you know, I wasn't questioning it because all my colleagues did the same thing. And because I was in charge of a bigger territory and there was sort of a potential carrot stick of like becoming a partner down the road in this business, like I really wanted to prove myself, right? In order to again, get those accomplishments and accolades, right? And so when I was on the trade mission going to Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey at the time, I was in Moscow in early 2012. And during that trip, when I got off the phone with my ex-boyfriend at the time, I remember saying to him, man, I don't know much longer I can do this. I haven't seen my family. I work all the time. It's not as sexy as it looks. I didn't see Turkey in the light because I was in a conference from 7 a.m.
that's the thing.
9
You're not getting to see all the beautiful sides of the country. Because like, and eating my dinner at hotel rooms, you know, like it's not like I'm having a trip of a vacation, right?
Yes. And I was exhausted mentally and physically. At that point, I hadn't taken a holiday for almost 2.5 years. And so I was, you know, the very responsible Asian, you know, daughter that was paying off her debt all the time. So whenever holiday, you know, if I was supposed to take out my holidays, I would ask for a payout instead and kept working so that I could keep paying down my loans and so forth, which is, you know, I think I could have probably adjusted the frequency of how fast I paid off that debt, for example, right? But again, in hustle mode, you're like, I do whatever it takes, and I think I can do it, right? And so my body,
it's a sensible thing to reduce your debt before it starts accumulating. I mean, like it makes sense. It makes total sense, but at what cost,
but not at the exactly like what's that cost, you know, and is it worth it if you're dead, right? Like it doesn't, you know. And so I actually, my body really gave up. Like my mental mind was still on the go, but my body was like, no, we're going to take you out and we're going to put you down because you are very tired. And I developed actually temporary agoraphobia for 3 days in the hotel room.
Yeah. Where so you had really a physical manifestation of how somatic, unwell you felt mentally.
Yeah, it was a very somatic experience because I was always in my head, you know, I was a very heady person. And so my body was like, oh, you didn't feel all the signals we gave you.
Now I'm giving you very strong signals.
Yeah, you're not allowed to leave the room now. Okay, like, so that's literally what happened. And that was very scary, obviously, to have like an elongated panic attack almost, right?
Oh
and I couldn't leave the hotel room because I had this unreasonable fear that something would happen to me and I couldn't come out of the door.
And you were in Turkey at the time, right? So
Russia,
I assume
in Moscow.
Russia, so I assume your Russian isn't like very polished.
No. And I didn't know anyone there. It was my first time in the country, right? Yeah. And I didn't have even like my own colleagues there. Luckily, I had an agent I was working with there that helped me through some of the things to get home and things like that. But it was a very scary time. But, you know, that was the catalyst for change for me. It was so severe that it did force me to do something. And that's what is the truth. You know, I wish I could say I had a euphoric moment of like, I think I would love, you know, to have a beautiful life instead of this and be very autonomous over my decisions. But it actually really took a breakdown and illness. And I think sometimes that happens to people, right? We don't really see the truth. And want to face the truth, right?
Yeah. And I feel I see it like most of my clients, and myself included, are high achieving people who are like, I used to set ambitious goals and I went to do it and then something happened and now they're not. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of high achievers that went for me, like with the scenic route. I always tell people, well, like when they ask me like, well, how did you find the scenic routing business? How did you like started doing business differently. I'm kind of like, well, I kind of know, I don't know. I want to tell the glossy story of I had an epiphany and I had all this accumulated wisdom and I decided to do that. But actually, like the Sini Groot hit me over the head hard a couple of times until I was like, okay, I got it. It's really bad. I have to take care of myself now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is correct that humans are more motivated by pain, and so that makes us sort of make changes. It is, yeah. And I think sometimes it's necessary, like we have to go through a little bit of pain, and hopefully it's not the thing that kills you.
Yes,
right.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think for me, if I had sort of taken that pain and went, oh, I didn't make any meaning from it, right, or I didn't make sense of it, and I kept going, even though that happened, then yeah, maybe I didn't learn something and that pain was not worthwhile. But I think, I was very lucky to, when I took a sabbatical from work from that illness, it was just my nervous system really shot. I had severe burnout. I was malnourished probably because I wasn't eating right. I wasn't exercising.
Which is quite often if you're traveling all the time, it's
and just fundamental happiness, right? Like, and it was very, like, the workplace I was in was a bit quite toxic between the partners that worked there. And a lot of that, I was quite sensitive to those things. And, that accumulate, it's not one thing, right? It's always an accumulation, right? Of the experience. And also me not having the things I value in life. So when I really loved my family and friends and community, and I wasn't spending any time doing any of that, and so when Sunday night rolls around, I always remember at 7 o'clock. It's always at 7 o'clock on Sundays. I dreaded the rest of the night because I knew tomorrow was Monday, and it was a shitload of emails in my inbox. And even taking a holiday was hard because I was like, man, there's going to be so much I have to deal with when I get back, And so it was that kind of culture that like rewarded people that checked their emails when they were on holiday.
It's the culture of just stay late. It doesn't really matter what you do, just stay late.
Yeah,
and be available 24/7 and.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I took that sabbatical, I was very lucky to work with a really amazing therapist who I still work with today. So it's been a 10-year relationship, with her. And she was really good at not shoving a bunch of pills down my throat, and saying, oh, you have anxiety, or, you're upset.
It's just curing symptoms, but not going to the root.
Instead she's like, well, because I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, I think something's wrong with my brain. I need an
something
MRI. broke. Something broke, and it's just that thing, and if we fix it, maybe it's a medical condition.
I can go back to working 24/7. Like, good daughter.
And so she's like, wait a second, before we start diagnosing it to be like a medical condition, and maybe it is, like, let's go with the fundament. Let's talk about the fundamentals of your life, like basic needs that you are doing or not doing. How often are you sleeping? How many hours do you sleep a day? Right? How many what do you do on your spare time? How many hours are you working?
How you nourish yourself?
Like all the really, very basic
it's Maslow's pyramid, right? Like, basic needs, check, right? Until like, are you actually doing something purposeful and something with value? And then you're like,
even before we go into meaning and purpose, she was just really going, what is going on day to day? I was skipping breakfast. I was doing all these things that were very not healthy for my mind, my soul, my body, right?
Long term, especially. Right? Like,
and
you can skip breakfast every now and then, nothing bad happens. But if you do it repeatedly, like, you will not know. This is so crazy because I notice for myself too, right? Like, you can do something and there is no immediate effect when you skip breakfast or when you don't drink enough water, when you don't, like, you will feel fine the next day. But if you keep on doing that with the thing like, oh, I felt well yesterday, so I'll feel fine tomorrow, there will be a breaking point where it just kind of like goes. Then you're like, well, how did that happen? I have no idea.
And I think when you're in this sort of busy schedule, you're very unconscious about these things to notice too, right? So even if your body is like hydrated, or you're like, man, my back really aches from not exercising or whatever, you don't even really notice. And that's what I really felt. I was very disconnected somatically from my own body, because I was really like an automation every day. I was just like going to work the same way, doing the same things. I didn't have any contrasting hobbies or quality time with my friends and my partner and things like that, to kind of like have a break,
have
from
a balance,
hustle,
or like just more of it was just more of the same.
Exactly. And so that was a really eye-opening, you know, insight for me to go, okay, maybe it's things that I can control, you know, like
Mm.
I can, you know, if I said no to certain things at work, if it got me fired, then I would then know that's not the right place for me to work, right?
Mm.
If I was still doing my job, but not doing above and beyond what I'm hired to do just because someone else is doing it that
Yeah,
way,
that's not
you
like the
know?
term for it where they have quiet quitting, right?
Yeah, you know, like
Which is
it
just
is, you know,
basically no, you're just doing what you're supposed to do. And
yeah,
this
exactly. Not
tendency we
anything
have
above
of,
and beyond.
yeah, exactly. This tendency we have to over deliver, which is
Hmm.
funny because it most people who have it who have had it in corporate, that tendency to over deliver, also have it when they're on their own in business. So this is still something
Totally.
to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. And so, you know, my challenge at the time when I was contemplating quitting corporate, right, was obviously like, what am I going to do when if I do
mm,
quit corporate? But I also knew from these conversations with my
mm.
therapist and having a bit of time off from work that like majority of my misery and depression was associated with my job. Right. And it didn't mean that I didn't like my job, you know? So it
No.
wasn't like, oh my God, I loved my clients. I
Mm-hmm.
love what I was selling. I
Mm-hmm.
liked talking about education in Canada. Like I liked all those aspects
Mm-hmm.
of the job, but it was more like how I had to do that job. You know, the
Mm.
politics I had to deal with at work, the, you know,
Yeah.
like doing things that were not in alignment with the way I wanted, you know, want to be
Yes. I mean,
treated at
especially
work,
when you're in a toxic
right?
environment. Like, and you've said before, like you sometimes had almost kind of like that partnership, like the tangled carrot situation.
Hmm.
So do you also feel like there were moments when maybe not on like with malice, but where you felt like kind of like used as kind of like, well, just like
Yeah,
I'm just like
I think.
a pawn that they kind of like send around the world and then tangle
Mhm.
this carrot in front of her.
I think it was the harder I worked, the more they gave me. It wasn't a reward. It was like, oh, you can do more than the average person. So we'll give you more territory to cover, for example, but not better pay, right?
Mm,
It was more like a
mm,
reputation thing, right? And there wasn't
no.
any, like, there wasn't really a great benefit for me to do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one of the actually eye-opening things was when I did a calculation, because I usually, when back in the day, I used to be so, um, avoidant of money. Like I never, because I would make a lot of money, but I would also spend a lot of money. And I
Oh,
would
yeah,
used to
very
pay
common.
off, like I would pay my bills, you know, credit cards or whatever in the month. And I literally would cover with my hand, like on the
The
screen.
total.
Mhm. What I
Oh,
needed, like what happened, because I didn't want to face some of those things that was going on. So part
oh.
of my challenge when I was figuring out what's the plan to quit
Mm-hmm.
corporate is I had to get really clear about my numbers. Like, what was I spending money on? What was I
Mm.
making? What was the bare, like what was
Why
the
were you
minimum I
spending
had to
money?
earn? All sorts of things, going out, because I, you know, if I had a chance to go out, I would be like, yes, let's go out for like lots of drinking and lots of all the things to numb me out, you know.
Mm,
If I, and
mm.
I would buy stuff, right? Consumerism. I mean, not so much now that I live in Bali because I'm more of a minimalist these days, but back in the day, you know, I could buy a bunch of stuff on Amazon at 11 p.m.,
Mm.
you know. You would get
Do you
really nice
felt like
looking
you
clothes.
deserved that you kind of like used it or misused it as a treat to kind of like treat
Yeah, it
yourself
was,
because you
I
worked
think
hard
it's,
and
yeah, I think it was kind of a reward that was a short-term reward,
mm-hmm.
but it made me feel good
I mean, you
for a
have a little
temporary amount of
buzz when
time.
you add something to cart. I mean, that's we know
Yeah,
that,
there
right?
is.
That's how it works. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It was like a little ping of like euphoria, right? Like of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can get that thing for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I was going through the numbers, you know, after really facing like, okay, yes, I overspend every month, but now, if I know why I'm overspending, I can figure that out. If I don't know, then I'll be in the dark about what to
Yes.
do, right? It's
Yes.
not empowerment at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was when I did the math, I was like, okay, now that I actually know what I take home, and what taxes were, because I was earning above the bracket, the
Mm-hmm.
next bracket of taxes. So about 35 to 40% of my taxes, of my salary, sorry,
Yeah. What's tax?
going to taxes every
Mm-hmm.
month. And then when I looked at the take home pay, because I never really looked at that before, and divided it by the number of hours I was usually working at the
Oh,
office,
what was your hourly?
that truth was that I was making less than my own assistant who worked half the
Oh
hours I did.
my God.
Right. And so that really
Yeah.
woke me up to be like, what is this all
Mm,
for? And
yeah.
also, I had this notion that I thought, I'm not allowed to quit unless I made the exact same amount of my six-figure job in corporate. I just made that up. I can't quit until I can replace it.
Self-imposed like limitation.
Yeah,
where you're like, okay,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's fine if I calculated my life and that's what it cost, but that wasn't true. I just kind of came up with that because I didn't want to give up something. I was only willing to give it up if it was more than or equal to what I was being paid, right?
Why
and
do
I
you
think
think
that was a very stuck. I mean, just the again, that poor immigrant mentality of scarcity of like, oh, you got this thing that pays the bills, and you focus a lot on the pay.
Be grateful. And
yeah, of course. And like it made sense that the metric that I'm looking for was just to replace the income, right? But then, that's sort of when I had to realize, that, well, what else am I hoping to gain besides making money? Is there anything else that I benefit from working for myself? What's worth the taking of the risk that's not just money related? Because if it's money related, then you would just go get another job, right? In a better environment.
Yeah, I mean, that would have totally been an option. You were with the company for a long time. That's the thing, right? Like I'm always saying, it's not necessarily has to be entrepreneurship, right? There's still good jobs out there. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I knew in my heart of hearts, I was always quite unemployable in a way. Like I was like constantly leaving every 2 to 3 years because I outgrew a lot of things. I'll be very, very excited in the beginning. And then the minute it hits a bureaucracy thing, like I'm not allowed to do that because it's not part of the SOP or like this or that. And I'm like, that freedom of creativity or just knowing what to do that's right,
I would always
undermined.
Usually, there was always, for me, it was always kind of like, maybe it was like the 8-month mark or so where I would like really piss off someone from upper management. and they would be like, oh, okay, there's no future in this company because, well, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah. And so, my first business was actually what I call a transition business because it wasn't my like passion, I would say. Like I'm not like passionate about education in Canada, but I didn't know how to do it. I had good contacts in the network. And also what was most important is that from my experience, I did see a missing gap of opportunity of certain services and partnerships and projects that I could do. And so that became kind of okay, let's focus on that. And actually my bosses became my first consulting clients. And I negotiated, a way that I could work part-time for them, in a sort of consultancy by project basis, while I bought myself some time, right? So that would pay the bills. It wasn't make me like super wealthy, but it paid my bills and I didn't have to take out a loan or anything like that.
Which is more when I don't know that all the people have when they start their business. Right? Like,
exactly.
I mean, I'm breaking so even. Like happy. I did the same thing. My ex-corporate was like, was one of my first clients.
And so when I started that business, it allowed me to kind of learn self-employment to a familiar industry. So it didn't feel like, it was a very comfortable leap, like what I call a lateral leap, right? Something that you just do that and you have experience. Maybe you change the focus a little bit on what scope of work you might do, but you're familiar with this.
Yeah,
so
it's not like you're suddenly desired to do like a 360 and be like, oh, okay, do something completely different. Which is smart, right? Because there's so many changes you have to get familiar with when you're out on your own, like how to run business, how to do your own taxes, blah, 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 blah.
And everyone has a very different risk tolerance. Like who I was at 2012 has, half the risk tolerance I have today, but that's only because I have experience and I've done different things, right? But I'm not more braver or courageous than anyone else. It was more calculated risk that I took, right? Which is like, okay, if I minimize my expenses to not go out every night, or if I stop doing these things or buying off Amazon at 11 p.m.
Shit off of Amazon,
what is my bare minimum? What's my break-even number every month? And that number was actually a lot like smaller than what I thought, And so once I knew that, again, getting clear on those numbers always helped to make clear decisions. Then I could understand, oh, okay, I just have to take on one client for a retainer or negotiate that consultancy project with my bosses for the next 9 months. And that buys me 9 months of a runway to be safe. And in those 9 months, I'm going to spend 20 hours a week working with them. And then maybe the last 20 hours a week for the week working on something else for myself if I wanted to, right?
I love that you said, like, it bought you a runaway where you felt safe. Because that's the thing, right? Like, I see it so much in my coaching clients, and I've recognized it in myself, right? We make different decisions obviously, whether we feel safe or not. And you do not never want to make a business decision or possibly also general a life decision when you're feeling unsafe, unless you're like in absolute crisis trauma situation. But don't make decisions about your business, because then what happens usually is you come into these, oh, I should. You go into how other people made their 100K in 100 days, and you try to be like, oh, okay, that worked for them, I'm just gonna copy that. It feels safe again. And this is kind of like a false safety. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors. So I love what you said. You did what you had to feel safe enough to pursue what you wanted.
Yeah,
I feel it was just so crucial.
Yeah, it's like one stepping stone of very many stepping stones, right? So I think that helped me to think about taking bigger steps, because I wasn't thinking about, is this a forever thing? The minute we start to go in a more permanence mindset, then we do want to be perfectionists, because we don't really want to screw it up if it's a permanent position. But things don't have to be permanent, right? It can be, what's the decision for the next 90 days? What's the decision for the next 6 months, right? Like, and as you make those small imperfect actions, right? That's when you're going to get clarity, because you get to experience a decision, and you can also tweak. You can go, you know, that wasn't for me. I could easily do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, this is part of why most of us went out on their own, because of freedom. And have certain liberties, and when you're actually in moments, in seasons where you're like, oh, actually I can change whatever the fuck I want, then you're like, no, maybe no, and you're very hesitant. So that's also really interesting.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, that's how Screw the Cubicle was born. It was, you know, like I said, the only intention was it was a blog to document my journey, and also kind of a you know, my mom was calling me every day going, what the hell are you doing with your life? Go back for your job, like go, you know. And so I was like, all right, I don't want to talk about these things anymore. So go to this blog that I am, you know, writing about, and just there are my thoughts, right? And so that's actually how it started, with no conditional expectations of what it is, but just what I needed at the time, which was a space to have an outlet.
Yeah, it was serving you, primarily you.
Exactly. And if that felt good enough, yeah, and then it deserves it deserves to be launched for that reason only, right? And it wasn't until one of the readers from, you know, later on, many months later, wrote to me, and she's a lawyer in Toronto, and she was like, hey, your story, you know, I'm a bit older than you, but your story is exactly the same as mine, except I didn't make that choice to leave corporate, and I'm now 45, and I would love to coach with you. What are your coaching rates? And I was like, what is a coach? Like, I didn't even know what that was, you know? And so this is, again, another great example of like, you never know what doors open, you know, until you do something. And that moment changed my life, something, right?
And the thing is, it's not just do something, but the tricky bit is do something that feels joyful and expansive to you, right? That is truly you, truly yours, and you're just sharing it for the sake of sharing it. That may come devil or high water, like, don't care, I'm just gonna share because I have this intrinsic feeling of sharing it, like kind of like an artist, like you share because this is it, just you need to release it for one reason or another, and then it's out there. And if you truly, I believe, if you truly share from the heart, it will resonate with people who are in a similar situation. And this is the proof, right? Like, she wrote you because she saw something in that made her, yes. And it was not your sales page or your funnel.
No, I mean, I didn't have that. Yeah. And I think, you know, what was important for me at the time too was that I allowed myself to be creative in the blog, because I had safety, right? In something else, a different project that pays the bills.
Yes.
I didn't say, hey, new project, you need to bring me income to feed myself and shelter myself right away. That's too much pressure. Then all of a sudden the blog is very intimidating, because, every blog needs to lead
this
to
needs to make money or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And again, that's just my story and how I process that, right? But for someone like me, right, I needed to have a different project that was a money-making thing to pay the bills for now. It's not my forever thing, so that I can have the freedom and the safety to explore other ideas that I don't know yet if it's going to make me money.
I go out on a limb and say this will resonate with all the scenic route people. Seriously, because like this is also what I tell my coaching clients, like, if it's really, if you're worried about how you're going to pay bills at the end of the month, like, take that pressure off. It's not going to work. How we're wired, how we're, like I said, we're most of us are high achievers or really empathic or highly sensitive people. It doesn't work. Like, you just really burn yourself to the ground.
Exactly. And not feeling bad that your journey, and you know, it's not going to look like a Forbes success story, because that's not regular people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Forbes,
So like,
you're not, cares?
You're not hearing of other stories as well that it's very quiet behind the scenes, the people making it in the world, but it's not rah and very highlighted on a stage, right? And so you know, I like the ideas of telling stories of other people too, because I think that brings a different element of truthfulness, of like, there's not one way to get there.
No.
Right? There's so many pathways to get to your version of success, you know? And so for me, it needed these two projects to go in conjunction with each other with different intentions, right? And then when I decided, even the same thing happened when I moved to Southeast Asia. I didn't, again, expect that to be 8 years, you know, we're at 9 years later in Asia. But when I first took the first one-way plane ticket, you know, in 2013, I only had one promise to myself, which was, I'm going to spend 6 months in Southeast Asia. If I hate it halfway through, or this whole remote work thing doesn't work for me, you know, I was trying to be a digital nomad, I'll just come back. Like, it's not really, you know, but if I said, oh, this move is like my future and I will be abroad all the time, then I will be too scared to make that move, because again, I really believe in like testing and exploring with a boundary. So
you have a play mindset, or like a discoverer's mindset, right? Where you're just like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna try shit. And yes, I really want this to happen because it would be cool. But at the same time, you're releasing it. You're detaching from the outcome. Yeah.
And I think a short term, you know, we're always taught to plan like 5, 10, 15, 20 years of goals. But knowing what I know today, it's like actually planning every 90 days is probably the most accurate. You know, because we really can't see who we are becoming. We don't know what are better roads, you know, what sometimes, you know, that old saying is like, what you need is not, or what you want is not what you need, right? And it's really hard to know, right, without information and data. And we can scare ourselves and doubt the process of doing hard things if we are planning for too far ahead, right? Like, it's something we just cannot control. But I can control my next 30 days. You know, I have a little bit more autonomy over the next 90 days even, right?
Or but the next quarter.
The next quarter, right? It doesn't really have to be a huge thing. But that promise to myself, just like, you're just going to go, and there's a boundary of time. It's not forever. And if it works, it works. You'll come back and you recalibrate.
Is that how you also approach, like, then? So you had your first coaching client. So, and then you kind of like realize, okay, this might be a business. So is this play mindset also how you approach like building out the Screw the Cubicle?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, a lot of the concepts of what I learned along the way, right, of building a business that's simple and not complicated, and doing kind of just like, you know, like I teach a lot about, you know, back in the day when we graduate from high school, or sorry, university or college, internships is a very common thing, for example, in North America. You go on an internship, you don't get paid. You do it to understand where you might
get accolades, get networking. Blah blah blah. And
also just feel like, what part of law do you want to be in? What part of in the hospital do you want to be in? Like, you know, as adults, we kind of are expected to just know what career we're meant to do. And so for me, when I was kind of like entertaining this idea of like, maybe, well, I don't know. Like, I could have just like gone and paid $1,000 for a brand photo shoot and another $5,000 for a website. And, you know, I could have gone that route, right? And then spend a lot of money without knowing. Or could I just say yes to this Toronto lawyer and say, listen, I don't offer coaching services, but it's a very interesting thought you just gave me. Would you be willing to do a few sessions? And I'm going to charge you an intro. Right? Yeah, exactly. And so you know, this is a big part and parcel of you know, the framework I teach in, you know, one of my programs called 90-Day Launch. Is part of that is we test and we collaborate with real humans before we launch anything. And so you don't need to invest in a website. You know, you don't have to do any of those.
I mean, that requires to take messy action. I'm all for messy action. But there's like a bit of a mindset fuckery that comes with messy action, especially when you're a high achiever. So how you're dealing with that?
Well, I think messy action can be married with also great market research that you do before you take the messy action, right? So a big, like, you know, so like before I charge this woman money, for example, I would get on a call with her and go, what are some of the things that you're struggling with? You know, and I didn't say I'm going to solve all her problems, because she's got marital problems too. She's got all these other things that are going on.
You're not
in her life.
Licensed psychologist, psychotherapist.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And so part of my ethics is that I have to say, those are totally things that can happen when you transition. But this is where I can focus. Here's where I think I can offer the most value. And sure, I may not have done this as a job or a business, but I have proof in the pudding of doing this for myself. And if we're willing to take this ride together, I'm happy to charge you a really low hourly rate, you know, I'm happy to teach you what I know and help you figure out this plan for yourself, right? So I wasn't dishonest to say, oh yeah, I've got a package ready for you. No, I said, actually, I have been writing about all this stuff for you. Yeah. And you gave me a great idea. Would you be willing to do this with me? Right? It's an invitation. It's an invitation to get my and support.
It's an honest conversation, right? I feel we, especially when you're starting out, but I feel it happens at every level. Like, I mean, I had it when I started out. I had it when I had my first 100K a year. I had it when now I'm getting closer to the 250K a year. Like, there's this the thing of like, well, like, do I appear? I want to look like I got my shit together, right? And you want to appear professional, and it's the thing, right? Like, this almost humbling sense of honesty where you're like, look, we're just gonna try things. And yes, there's something in it for you, obviously. And that's what I love, right? Like, in a sense, what you did with her, it was paid market research. It was paid research for you, right? Because you were trying something. You didn't know if you like it, but it got paid. Yeah. That's the crucial thing.
Right. And also, I think, you know, what has been a big learning curve for me at the time was that I can be an expert to help this person as long as I'm just a couple steps ahead of them. I don't need to be 10 steps ahead of them. Right. And that's what I teach my clients as well. They'll be like, oh, I've only done this in the last couple of years. So it's like, well, you're a couple of years ahead of the next person that's going to get your help. Yeah. So, you know, even if I'm just 6 months ahead of someone, right? Or even if I've done
save someone 6 months.
Exactly. You know, or the fact that I've gone through the hurdle or gone through the trenches and they don't need to get stuck in the mud back there. Yeah. I can support them through
if there's one mud I can help you avoid.
And that's what you have to trust yourself to do, is that I have an ethical work ethic, right? As I said, so I will do what it takes to get to that support that this person needs, with boundaries, of course. But if I didn't think of something came up, I would probably go on my own time and create that template or create that thing for them, because it's still something that I can benefit from for my next clients and so forth, right? So really look at it as a collaborative effort, right? So even the way I teach my clients to launch a business, all of it is driven by collaboration with people, help them build that business into a real offer. You don't think up of magical things to put in your offer because you think it's going to work. It's validated by real humans that are representation of the people that you want to help. So there's no ego in there, but what you think should be true, but you have to be inquisitive and curious to be like,
ego.
Because you're a little ahead, right? So if you're like, 2 years down the road or whatever, that thing, that expertise, you don't think like a beginner mindset anymore, right? So you have to get back to the basics of like, what's really going on? And what are people saying, feeling, thinking, avoiding, wishing for, that is not part of your psychology anymore, because you've already, you're ahead.
You went through that, you moved through that, you've incorporated it, or you did a lot of things. I mean,
even I'm almost a decade-year-old business, and I still do market research interviews every year, because I want to know my community. I want to know what's going on in their world. I'm also in Bali a lot of the time. And so what's happening over there, I'm in a bubble. I want to know what's going on with the culture, the work culture in America. I want to know what's going on with the interest rates hiking, in North America. How's that affecting their sense of security with themselves, right? All of that really matters to, you know, the more in the know I have about my industry, the more finger on the pulse I have about the problems to be solved, then my business can solve better problems every single time, right? And I think people appreciate that, being a part of your community, that you're not just telling them what to do, that you are, they tell you also things that they really would love help with, and together you come up with ideas and, you know, trainings and content and offers together. And then it's like, why aren't we doing that? Right. And so
I love that. It's kind of like how you reinvented the definition of entrepreneurship and work into collaboration.
Yes, yes. I absolutely believe that. And collaboration with even like people that seem to be your competitors even. Right. And so that used to be a lot in the coaching world, like, don't talk to that person, they're too much of your audience type and all this sort of stuff. But I really realized there's actually, someone could coach for some, like, you know, I do a bit of career coaching and business coaching and work reinvention stuff. Right. And there's always someone else that does something similar. Of course there is. But actually, there's moments we can join forces. There's moments we can actually input, because I might solve that problem a little bit differently, or I solve a different stage of that problem.
Yeah, as long as your values align and you're like, yes, this is a person I want to be associated with. I want to be in, like, I want to work with, I want to collaborate with, because we align, because we approach things similarly, because we believe in the same things. Then I don't know. I'm also not a great fan of almost like artificial hostility, because it comes from scarcity, right? It comes from the idea of, oh, there are not enough coaching clients in that pond, and I need to be the biggest shiniest fish. It's like, well, something of your story will resonate with,
that's the only thing that will be different. And that's enough people in the marketplace, you know, that will choose to write mentors and guides, not because of the outcomes, because a lot of people do similar outcomes, but, you know, it's always your story, it's always your perspective, it's always your voice, right? And that is important, and that's part of knowing that if you have a story that can really resonate with people, and you're honest and transparent and generous about that help, you know, like my blog was an act of generosity, right? It still is. I write newsletters that give away a lot every single month, and some people will be like, man, everyone will just get something and not ever pay you. But it's like, well, I'm not charging for information. Actually, coaching is not about more information. They can just read a book if they want coaching. They can
Google.
Like, they can Google.
But information overload these days, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the features and benefits and value proposition of my work cannot be about content. You know, it has to be about the ecosystem I'm building that they belong into,
and also how you make them feel. I feel that's
how I make them feel.
How you make them
and the
feel.
Values, right? Like the values and philosophies that are behind the way I teach business, or behind the way I teach lifestyle businesses, right? That it's going to look a little different. And I'm also walking the talk. I'm someone who has a lifestyle business that don't work every day, right? And so I'm not talking to not every entrepreneur will work with me, because they're building e-commerce businesses or big empires, or they want bigger teams. I don't want to attract those people. Those are not my people. My people are the cozy boutique solopreneurs that love having a life. They want to work 25 hours a week. They want to make good money, and they're kind of minimalist like me as well. They don't want a complicated business, and they really care,
focusing on the essentials.
And they also really care about doing things well and meaningfully, rather than 100 things I want to offer and running out of control about what that is, right? Which is what happened to me at my second burnout, you know, in 2015 in my business, because I, you know, I didn't grow my business in a way that was honoring, right, these qualities and values I'm talking about now, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's there's always a point where you get kind of like, almost, I don't know, I call it lured to the dark side, where they're like, look, come over here, we don't have cookies, but we have funnels, and like and like online courses, and like building teams, and like ad campaigns, and you're like, ooh, maybe I should like dabble in there for a moment. But as you've said, if it, like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that,
right?
But if it if you're being honest and this is really not what you want, then why do it?
Absolutely. Right? I mean, that saga of the second burnout was a really huge turning point for my body of work. right? And so every burnout was a body of work in a way. So it's like, okay, when's the next one? When's my next body of work involving?
I need another body of work here. Come on.
No, yeah, come on, burnout. No. Now it'll be hopefully just a tweak. But yeah, the 2015 burnout was interesting because I was making the most money in my business. I had a great team. I was launching 8 products a year. You know, I had retreats. I had online programs. It's a lot. And I was like, oh, this is the way you have a coaching practice. Like you have all these things, and
this is how the gurus tell you how it's done.
Yeah, and you have a social media strategist, and then you also have this other person does all these other things, and I wasn't questioning like, do I even want to be on social media, right? Do I? So and if I don't, why am I hiring a full-time social media strategist? Right?
Yeah, or am I still doing actually the things I want to do in my business, right?
That's like, right. Yeah, I mean, and so
I remember I also had a time when I got hired like someone to write my newsletters. I'm like, no, actually, I fucking like writing my newsletters. Why would I hire that?
Yeah. And I mean, again, if that's the model you want, that's totally fine, but it wasn't mine, right? And I think that was the misalignment again of that. I was looking at a cookie cutter or a sort of paint by numbers way of doing a coaching practice because all my other friends were doing that, you know, and you want to succeed, you want to achieve.
So in a way, right? You were following someone else's version or definition of success and not your own.
Absolutely. Like I was really proud of the work I was doing with my clients, but I wasn't as intentional about all the ways I operated in my business, because again, it was, I have to do that to be X, right? And I wasn't questioning, like, so even the word funnels, the only way you look at funnels in our industry is always about automation and all these sort of things. But a funnel can simply be a discovery call. A funnel can simply be an email, right? A funnel can simply be an invitation to a coffee date, right?
A funnel is everything.
You can decide.
Yes, every sort of entry point or welcoming into your space, into your ecosystem is, if you technically want to look at that, I don't know if it's helpful, but it's a funnel.
Absolutely. And there's fun things like like some things I do that other people don't do to make social media more personal for me. Like if someone follows me on LinkedIn, like usually just, follow them back and that's it. Right. But I will send them a voicemail. I'll just be like, hey, great to meet you. Tell me more about yourself. And they'll be shocked. They'll be like, oh my God, you sent me a voicemail? Yeah. Like, it wasn't a template. You actually are trying to get to know me, so I love sending people voicemails on Instagram and things like that because I don't want to type and I don't want to go through a bunch of commenting and replying and I don't want to do that game of what they tell you to do to enhance your Instagram channel. I don't have time to go comment on other people's posts. I don't want to do that.
That's a classic Instagram growth tactic. Yeah.
I don't want to growth hack anything. I want to, I don't want you to follow me or us to follow each other if there's no reason to do that.
Yeah.
And so that has always been, that was a big turning point for me, because when I realized that even though I had been working with a great team, for example, I wasn't doing some of the intimacy things that I really cared about and believed in, even though other people are like, oh my God, you spend that much discovery call? Oh my God, you send them voicemails manually? All these sort of things. Same. But it's like, it's what actually connects me.
You're still actually doing discovery calls. Why? Well, I have an 80% closing rate on discovery calls. Why wouldn't I?
Right. Yeah. And also I want to get a vibe. I offer, I'm going to offer $19 courses here. I'm offering high touch services, and high touch services to me deserves a high touch service even before they give me their credit card.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's, if you're doing high ticket offers, it's about the relationship, right? That's the central point. You need to build a relationship with people, and I don't know, you're only going to build good relationship with people you're actually liking.
Exactly. That's one metric of success, right? Also, is if you like your clients and you can't wait to work with them, that's a metric of success. Yeah. And so, and if you think about how many people you have to hire sometimes to have a bigger business, again, do the math like I did when I was in corporate and realize actually a lot of my revenue just goes towards a team.
Yeah. Goes to my full-time social media strategist.
Yeah, and more. I had like 3 full-time people working for me. Wow. And then I'm worried about like, oh my God, I got to make payroll, and like I got to launch something else now, and it's like it becomes this machine that I didn't want, and now I can't even get mad because I'm the boss, And so that actually did unfortunately set me on a bit of a depressive, tunnel. But again, I remember, hey, sabbaticals are good. I took 3 months off my business. I did very minimal kind of like maintenance to clients I already had, but I didn't do any more new anything for 3 months, and really took my foot off the pedal, you know, for a little bit. And that was, again, very beneficial for me because it helped me again to question, am I building the business?
Space.
You know, that spaciousness to really think about like, what is all this for? What was the inaugural intention to have a business to begin with, right? And what feels like who am I really wanting to look up to? You know, I don't want to be the next Marie Forleo. I don't want to be like a huge empire like Tony Robbins. And then I looked at my own personal life, like, what are my values in my personal life that I'm not honoring in my business? So as I mentioned to you, I'm a minimalist in my regular life, right? I can travel in a carry-on to 3 continents and be fine because that's how I know how to layer and simplify my life.
That's a good skill. It goes out the window when you got kids. Like I haven't managed minimalism with kids. I don't know.
I know. That is a great business idea. That's a good business idea, by the way. Anyone that can deal with minimalism with children will
If you listen to this and you have this brilliant idea how to do carry-on traveling when you got a little toddler, like seriously, I gotta buy this course. Like whatever.
Yeah. You'll be promoted by both of us. Totally. And yeah, so when I looked at my life and I go, why am I so peaceful and harmonious in my regular life?
Big difference between business Lydia and personal Lydia.
Right. I was a maximalist, right? A maximalist in my business. And because again, I was unconsciously following a trend that was, again, nothing wrong with it, just it wasn't really for me. And that's where the suffering began, right? And then of course it took me a while to even recalibrate that model, because then I felt bad about, you know, not having full-time staff anymore. What are they going to do? Oh my God, I need to keep paying them. And you know, I had to deal with that as well. Just the people pleasing, not wanting to disappoint people, right? All that sort of stuff. And like, I probably wasted another 50 grand down the road of the next few months just paying salaries I didn't need. Yeah, that was another. That's another topic. But
we gotta do another podcast, part 2.
But that was a very significant moment for me to be very conscious about these bricks I was building in my business house. Like, what do I really want to include? What do I no longer want to include in my repertoire? Like I found myself like more of a marketer than a coach when I had that big business. And I was like, I didn't
like really like a CEO, marketer. Like managing people, running like the operational side
and also
of things.
Just marketing. Like, because I just was on every platform and doing all these things, right? And then I really had to kind of like, again, minimalize, like declutter, you know, my business and go, okay, out of all the marketing activities, what feels like ease? Oh, getting on podcasts, conversations, no skin off my back. Happy to do it. No big
makes me light up, makes me feel expansive, is fun. That
gets to keep, right? But this other thing about Instagram reels and all this stuff I've been forced to do, don't really love it. Doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Bye-bye.
And someone else could have a ton of fun.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
No longer for me, right? No longer for me. Now I post on Instagram when I want to. I do that maybe once every 2 weeks now, things like that. When I have something to say and I think it could be said there, I'll say it. But it's not the thing I commit to, right? So where I commit my actions now is much more in alignment with my wheelhouse and my desire points, which are my newsletters. Everyone knows they get my newsletters every single month. I commit to that no matter what. You know, my YouTube channel was great because I like filming videos. I don't like writing, for example, like big blogs. I love writing emails, hate writing blogs. And so I don't write blogs. I repurpose my newsletters to blogs on my website, but I don't write for SEO, this or that. It's just not my thing. I know
it's really creating spaciousness to know what you actually want to do.
And every SEO person is like, you're missing out. And it's like, sure, I could be FOMOing about all sorts of things. But if I'm going to spend time dealing with SEO, right? I could hire someone to SEO my site, sure. But that's about the basic I'm going to do, right? I'm not going to spend every blog strategically thinking, how am I going to strategically insert an SEO keyword?
What keywords research, keyword placement.
I don't want to do that. And sure, would it cost me some opportunities? Of course. But it's also...
Am I willing to let these opportunities go by?
And also I can find other opportunities, right? Like me getting on podcast shows or having my YouTube channel, having
what is your sort of genius, and make sure you're not missing those opportunities that match.
And that can flow for me. Doesn't mean I have to be everywhere, right? So that was really good for me to learn about boundaries and sort of like not having FOMO about, sure, this could make money if I do this thing, but it's not going to make me happier, right? So these days I'm very much, and that, you know, the way that I was repairing my own business, that changed my body of work, right? That changed the way I taught about business models. It changed the way I taught to different personality types, that not everyone should have the same model of business. How do we figure out what your ingredients of what makes you, right? And then infuse that into things like marketing and operations, and whether or not, is it a tiny business like mine? Or do you need part-time people? You know, everyone's going to have a different algorithm of what is happiness, alignment, success in their business, right? And most importantly, what's enough? What is enough? What's enough money? What's enough time?
Oh God.
Right? Because if we don't know what's enough,
we lost track of that as
we have
entire society and generation.
Absolutely. And that's a hard question. I still don't know that magic number, because I think the enough numbers
it also changes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to say.
Children,
it changes.
Right?
That's okay. That's okay. Or something. Or suddenly you have a parent that's in need, or it changes, which is okay.
Totally. So again, what's right for right now, right? Can't pre-plan too much ahead. So right for right now.
Stick to the 39 days your goals.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's been a great journey to get to know that, you know. And then now, as I talk about that more in my own business and in the way I teach, like, that's attracting better clients for me, because now we stand true to a philosophy we both jive with.
Yes.
So we're not building a bigger business for the sake of it.
No.
We're being very intentional how we built this business.
Yes.
And that brings out so much more value in what I offer, rather than just I'm the business coach or I'm the corporate transition lady. You know, now all of a sudden there's these richness to the how we do that.
Yeah,
you
there
know,
are levels.
And then it's like, okay, there's a very different philosophy now, you know, that encompasses the models and things like that.
Yeah. And again, this is what all the people mean, but no one tells you when they like throw around marketing bullshit bingo buzzwords like just be authentic on social media. Like, this is exactly it. You have to be willing to share a certain layers of depth with your community. And because that automatically will make you authentic and stand out, right? That's your positioning. Just the stories that make you.
Honesty is important, because not everyone will jive with your honesty either, and that's okay. Just like we don't date every human on the planet, we also don't work with everyone on the planet. And so actually sticking to that truth and going, hey, I believe tiny but mighty businesses are the future. I mean, that's not the truth for everybody, but that's my truth. And if you're into that truth, come and join me here. And if you're not, no problem. No hard feelings, right? But I'm not going to try to solve every problem, right? But the more I'm more honoring, right, those philosophies for myself, those concepts, those belief systems that really is me walking my talk, actually, the better I am positioned to help most ideal people that want that thing.
Yes, I agree. And I feel it's so important that we've touched on so many important points, that what kind of like what has to happen before that, and that's that you have to give yourself space. You have to make yourself feel safe to only then kind of like discover all these things about yourself, and then approach it with a play mindset of like, hey, we're just gonna try things, and again measure things, and like having both, right? It's not just I love how you fused like the analytical side of things and also kind of like the intuition part, right, where you're like, that feels like fun. And the somatic experience of things, right? Like, that makes me feel expansive. And I have some data to back it up or not. And like, you can have both. You can make a fusion.
Yeah. Well, we come with a head and a heart, right? Like, we need both. You know, the heart is for visions and intuition and things that we can't even put our finger why we thought that way or feel this way. You know, and the head is more of the one that gets shit done. And once we feel into where we want to go, right? The directional thing is more the heart, and the head is the one that makes it happen with strategy and steps and action. Right. So they both need to, it's like a brother and sister sibling relationship. You know, we do need
also
to get
a rivalry.
Can be a rivalry. But you know, knowing when to use the head and when to use the heart for different circumstances is also something that, you know, I've been really learning how to do as well. Right. And so, but yeah, you're right. If someone's in chaos, or you're already on the edge of burnout, is don't make any decisions at that point. You know, we need to subtract rather than add, right, at that point. And so if you can, right, I know not everybody can just take a 3-month sabbatical and things like that, but even taking some small ones, you know, giving yourself an hour of a walk every week on the same time every day, and allowing that to be your moment of just being quiet and listening to that voice and seeing if that voice gets a bit louder within you week by week. That's a mini sabbatical. It doesn't have to be a 3-month sabbatical in the island of Bali.
We're not all in a position to do the eat, pray, love thing.
Absolutely. You know, if you have to lock yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes so your kids aren't gonna, you know, like bother you, and you just have some quiet time, like that is some quiet moments, right? And so we do need that spaciousness, right, to gather our thoughts, feel how we feel, question certain things, right? There's always a reasoning behind what we call anxiety, what we call stress. It's not just something that happens to us. There are things leading up to it, right? That we have to acknowledge. And whether you're an entrepreneur or not, or feeling like you really got that freedom, you know, those belief systems can still follow you, just as it did with me.
Yes,
you know?
Of course. So, if you're not dealing with shit, it follows it. The stink is gonna follow you around. Like it's.
Yeah, totally. And so, I think, you know, that is a good thought to leave, you know, the people who are listening, is that you definitely need a lot more time of that connection with yourself than you realize. You know, people do it like beginning in January, goal planning day, you know, but it's like, I actually like doing it like once a month, or like even once a week if you can do it, just to check in on a debrief if you can. And that can make a huge difference in having clarity about what's next for me. What do I want to do? What I don't want to do.
Which is next in the driver's seat, the heart or the head?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Yeah, like I always, like, before, like, this would have been the perfect kind of like intro to what the kind of free gift you have for listeners. But I'm always going to ask one last question, because I'm curious and I'm always needing new inspiration. What book are you currently reading?
Oh, it is actually by, I want to remember her name, Lori something. It's called, I Think You Need to Talk to Someone. It's
Lori Gottlieb. It's Lori Gottlieb.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh my God.
Yes.
It's such a funny book. And it's great. It's about a therapist that is written a bit like a memoir of what, like, I've always been curious, what does my therapist think of me? And actually she does reveal a lot of,
look
like,
at those notes.
The things that she thinks about when she's dealing with a patient. And then it also talks about her own experience on the other, like she's on the other side of the chair.
Also see therapists.
Yeah, and what her therapist thinks of her as well. And, you know, like, it's hilarious. It's a hilariously written book and super insightful. And one of those books that I think it's like a light read, but really funny, and also deep, very deep.
It goes
as
deep
well.
too. Yeah,
it goes deep, but it has humor in it. And I think it's like, that's what I'm finishing reading.
I love it. Yes, this is that. So so back to the which is next in the driver's seat, the head or the heart. You got a free quiz on your website, screwthecubicle.com. The link will be in the show notes. Tell me something, like, quickly, who should do this quiz, who will profit from it?
This quiz was designed for people who have an inclination that they want to have a service-based business. Okay. So they're like, I'm always been a service person, or service-based, human to human kind of person. And I believe that the business I'm going to build has something to do with humans and not a product or e-commerce or something. Right. So if you believe something, it's like, I want to start a service-based business. You might be in that midst of, like, what kind of service-based business should I start? And, like, what does that look like? Because not everybody knows, there's so many different types of service-based businesses. So what I did was that I looked back at a lot of the research and the work that I've done with hundreds of clients in the last, 9 to 10 years. And I sort of have sorted them out. I'm sure it's not all the profiles, but the majority of people that fall under 5 different categories of a service-based business type. Not just the model, but the personality type behind that business model type. And so, for example, there's the producer, there's the strategist, there's the coach, there's the educator, there's the community builder. And each of them have different superpowers and different ways of working, and also different designed offers that are more in alignment with the way that they make
to work with their strengths.
Exactly. And so it's not just like, here's your personality and you should be a coach or whatever. It kind of breaks down actually how you show up to be a coach. That's different. Right. And also what are some of the elements of your unique proposition you should be talking about and infusing into your offers. And then down, if you enter into my newsletter, you'll also learn a lot more about what kind of offer types are right for this personality type. And so it's a really robust report, but it's also really helpful with either will validate, you're like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about this, and it could be a nice to be so a lot of people take the quiz, they'll be like, oh, okay, you know what, I already knew that, but doing this quiz helped me to feel validated that that's the route I want to go. Or for some people, they're like, oh, it's not at all what I used to do in corporate, but I can kind of see that I'll be like that.
Now, this is what I do
in my real life, or who I'm becoming and things like that, right? So it really kind of helps with this inaugural question that most of my people have, which is like, what business should I start? Which one? What is it? You know, so once they sort of kind of understand at least the focus of where their genius zone could start a service-based business, then
they can start point for your journey of discovery, right? Like
exactly. Then they can start doing the next step of work, which is like, how do we repurpose your skills and expertise? You know, I talked about lateral leaps today about, you know, you might stay in the same industry and do something different, or you could have the secondary type of leap called the faith leap, which is something that you don't have any paid experience to do, but you have kind of a school of hard knocks to do. So for example, my first agency business, that was a lateral leap. My Screw the Cubicle business was a faith leap. I never been paid until that lawyer woman asked me.
You have no coaching. You had no coaching expertise prior to that
so
first client.
Both leaps will have different priorities to work on based on that credibility or experience they have to gain, right? Doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's just a very different journey.
There's no like judgment in that, or like good or bad. It's just, they're just different, and you just got to figure out. And I love that this quiz can help you do that.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a really good one to just open up the door for the next thing, so that you don't get so stuck on that one big question of what business should I start.
Keep going. I love that.
Yes.
Hey, Lydia, thank you so much for spending time with me on the Scenic Route podcast. It was an absolute joy to have you here. Thank you so much.
We must do it again. And I really love
Season 2 is coming, and we're going to do it.
Great.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.